Okay, hello to everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, and we are here online on the streaming of the webinar about ICO jurisdictions. We are sorry for the late start because we had some time fighting with the technology, but now finally we are here. And before we start, I would like to check if the sound is fine. Those who have already joined us, could you please write plus if you hear us well, if you see us well, if everything is good in terms of the connection. So could you please do it in the common chat so that we know that our presentation is technically you can hear everything. Okay, I see already the pluses and the comments. All right, so first of all, my name is Katerina. I'm a co-founder of InMind, and we are here today speaking about the jurisdictions of the ICO. So we'll take the example of the Switzerland and Israel. Switzerland is one of the very popular regulations. We already discussed it a few times on the webinars, on the meetups that we are conducting in Lausanne. And we will have today the updates. What are the news? Some information, just telling you a small spoiler. We'll have today a small dig inside the topic of taxation. And we have today a new jurisdiction, Israel, the jurisdiction that we have not discussed yet at our webinars. So really looking forward to learn more, to hear what's happening in Israel in terms of the ICO and crypto. We have today two wonderful speakers. And before I present them, just the format, a little bit about the format of the evening. So first, we will have short presentation about the jurisdictions, Switzerland, then Israel. You can ask your questions in the chat, which I see you already using, and we will answer those questions in the second half and the second part of the webinar, which will be more interactive, more the discussion. So don't hesitate, write your questions. I'm collecting them, and our speakers, our presenters today will be happy to cover them. So I'm getting to the presentation of our speakers. So we have today a speaker from Switzerland, attorney at law, Yassine Reski, who is representing today Valdervis company. Yassine has been working with blockchain projects for around a year. He is a specialist in taxation, so please do not hesitate to answer this question, to ask these questions, because from our experience, from last webinars, meetups, there are quite many uncertainties in terms of taxation. So Yassine is here today to answer those questions, to help you and give a bit more of insight. And the second speaker today is Avia Areka, who is the head of Avia Law Company, which is based in Israel. Avia is a lawyer. She has experience of around 2 years working with blockchain and crypto projects, and she's specializing on security laws and financial licensing. Avia is working with projects worldwide, so with the focus on projects from Israel, and Yassine is working mostly with Swiss-based projects. All right, so I think because we started a bit later, we can already switch to the speakers. And Yassine, I'm giving the word to you. Could you please briefly introduce us Swiss jurisdiction? What are the news? What are the trends? What are the moods? And in general, the attitude towards crypto and ICO in Switzerland?
Thank you, Katerina, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about ICOs. I really think it's important make the blockchain more understandable for the public, because at the end, when it comes to laws and regulations, the voters, at least in Switzerland, the voters should have the last word, even if, of course, the technology is being shaped by entrepreneurs, investors, and engineers. At the end, it must be the voters who should have the last word. So I like the fact that even when we talk about quite futuristic topics, we always need to go back to the basics. And I need to start with some very, very basic Swiss constitutional principles, and you will understand why. So, as you may know, Switzerland is a federal state composed by 26 cantons. And from a constitutional point of view, it means that the cantons are competent when it comes to regulate their territories, unless their competences are limited by the Swiss constitution. So basically, before it was written in the Swiss constitution, every canton was able to have its own currency, for example. But with the first federal constitution, the competence to print money was given to the federal states. And the same process goes for the army, the border duty, and so on. And in fact, during the history of Switzerland, the Swiss constitution did limit a lot the competence of the canton. And the Swiss constitution let them a very small margin within very specific areas to be able to have their own laws. And the reason why I'm telling you all this, it is because it seems that there is kind of a friendly competition between the Swiss canton to attract ICOs. At least, maybe from a foreign perspective, many foreign investors think that there are some big differences between the Swiss canton. We talk a lot about Zug, sometimes Geneva, but this competition is not really about the legal framework, because the main legal issues concerning ICOs are linked to civil law, regulatory law, and tax law, and those areas are mainly covered by federal law. So it means that basically the laws are the same everywhere in Switzerland. Now, it is true that there is still a small margin in which the canton can elaborate their own laws. For example, I can see that in tax law, where the income tax rates differ from a canton to another. You also have some specific small taxes. For example, in Geneva, you have a specific tax for some corporate business that you don't have in other cantons. But those are not really they're not that important in terms of regulations. But then, even if the canton cannot elaborate their own laws, it is often the cantonal administrations that apply the federal laws. So, for example, in civil law, even if contract and corporate laws are purely federal, you have the registries of commerce that are cantonal. And you need those cantonal registries to register your company and to fund it. And for example, if a company wants to implement some blockchain technology or to make an ICO, this company may need to fund itself by cryptocurrencies. And then you have some differences between the cantons, because for this very specific example, you had the canton of Neuchâtel and Zug that accepted cryptocurrencies to fund the company. And that was a very big news when it happened. Some scholars are not really convinced, so it's not because it has been done that it will be done all over the country. But still, in this very area, you could have some differences between the practice of the administration. And to go back to tax, it is the cantonal administration that is responsible for the collection of both federal and cantonal corporate income tax. So even when applying the federal law, it is true that the cantonal administrations can have a different practice. And there is a practice that seems to be more and more adapted by a lot of cantonal administration for the canton which wants to attract ICOs. And according to this practice, the financial resources received in exchange for the issued tokens in an ICO are treated as taxable return, regardless of the token's characteristics. So, for tax purpose, for like the tax income, there is the classification of asset token, utility token doesn't really matter. However, even if the resource received in exchange of the issued tokens is a taxable return, the issuing entity could record an equivalent provision, and this provision would correspond to the investment in its business. So if the provision is equivalent to the financial resources received in exchange for the issued tokens, there is no taxable income. And then the provision is dissolved when the financial resources obtained during the ICO are invested. So if the financial resources are not invested, then the difference is the taxable income. So this practice is an interpretation of the law, and it can depend on the tax administrations. That's the reason why I think it's very important in Switzerland to seek guidance from the administration. That's something very, very usual, not only for ICOs, but for, I think, every business. You can ask the cantonal administration, depending on where your company is registered, to ask the tax administration about the consequences of an ICO and about how it will be treated. They will probably ask questions, and then you can not obtain an agreement, but obtain their guidance about how it will be taxed. And that's something I think very important and quite easy in Switzerland. The administration, the tax administrations are quite open for discussion. And then it's true that it can depend on the canton. Right now you have the French-speaking part of Switzerland that is, I think, doing quite a great job for transparency and to help the taxpayers to know about all the issues that can be raised through an ICO or even through other blockchain projects. So I think that's an important point. And then, except from the civil and tax law, there is obviously the regulatory law. And I'm sure many of you have heard about the FINMA guidelines. So regarding those guidelines, I think it's important for me to say that the guidelines do not aim to establish a uniform regulatory approach on ICOs. And it's not only recommended, but I think it's evident that every entity organizing an ICO needs to seek guidance from the FINMA, because as the FINMA has said it many times before, every cases are different. So even if the FINMA has categorized the token into 3 categories that you know, asset token, utility token, payment token, it doesn't mean that some token can not fall into 2 or even all the categories, or maybe to a new category that the FINMA didn't think about. So it is really necessary to build an ICO project with not the cooperation, but I would say that the guidance of the FINMA and the tax authorities. So about the guidelines, I think it's not really necessary to go into too many details, because as I said, it's quite impossible to have like a guideline that would provide general advice. I could just say a few words about each category.
Yes, please. That would be pretty interesting to have an overview of different tokens.
So the first category, the payment tokens, can imply the fact that the issuer of such a payment token is providing a payment service. And therefore, the issuer of a payment token, like a pure cryptocurrency that only aims to facilitate payments and transfer of value. So the issuer of such a cryptocurrency could be providing a payment service and should therefore comply with the anti-money laundering rules. That can be heavy, but it is possible to accept the funds via a third party, for example, a bank, which is subject to the FINMA supervision already. So then, in such a case, there wouldn't be the need for the payment token issuer to be itself subject to FINMA supervision. But again, this would have to be discussed with the FINMA. You have also the assets token that are considered as securities in Switzerland. That implies the fact that you need to draft a prospectus describing very precisely your token. But in Switzerland, I would say the standards are quite low for the prospectus, and it can be, in some cases, it can be the white paper, which is, I think, quite rare. I don't know about the other jurisdiction, but to my knowledge, it can be really more complicated in some other jurisdiction. So that's something about the FINMA is quite open. But then, when the asset securities are basically sold, if the activity of selling the asset securities is conducted in a professional way and in the primary market, then you would probably need a dealer license. But for those types of token, I think it is even more necessary to ask the FINMA. Not only to ask, but to really have, I would say, almost their agreement for any activity linked to asset token securities. And then you have the utility tokens. This is a very tricky category because it's hard to find a pure utility tokens that wouldn't be considered as well as a payment token or sometimes as an asset token. So I think the hard part with the utility token would be to categorize it and to make sure the FINMA agrees that it's only a utility token, and then the rules, the regulatory framework for utility token would be way lighter regarding anti-money laundering rules and the need of a prospectus. I think it is possible that a utility token wouldn't be subject to those rules, but it's very doubtful that that a token can be qualified only as a utility token. A lot of utility tokens I've seen are usually also qualified as payment token and sometimes also as asset tokens. So for this category, I think is very tricky, and the categorization of this category of this token would be subject to a lot of discussion with the FINMA.
And do you think this kind of difficulty to categorize token as utility token is connected to the fact that that FINMA defines utility as like only if the product is already ready, at least to some percentage, like 80% or more, or like fully ready for the use? Yeah.
So exactly. In fact, in some cases, it's possible that the token would be first considered as a payment token or an asset token, and then when the project is almost finished, then would become a utility token. Also, it is difficult to prove or to show to the FINMA that a project is almost finished, and to really show how the token can give a real access to the to an application. Basically, the FINMA just want to avoid fake utility token that are in fact payment token with a very small part that is a utility token.
And one more question that I have, and I have a feeling that lots of people who are listening to us now would have, like speaking about those cases, Yasin, that you mentioned in Neuchâtel and in some other cantons where they could, like companies could be started without, just with crypto. Does it mean that those companies did not need to address to the bank? Because in this case, it means like they can open their wallet, their crypto wallet, and is that enough? Is it sufficient to open the company, or you need both crypto wallet and still you need the account in the bank?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, those two cases were very exceptional. I really don't think that one could base its project upon those two very exceptional cases. And to my opinion, it would still be necessary to open a bank account. That's actually very interesting that you mentioned bank account. I know it has been an issue for many companies linked to the blockchain industry. I will talk about it later because the Swiss Bank Association has published some guidelines, which is very, very interesting. But I don't see a company basically issuing tokens, making an ICO without opening a bank account.
So basically, there is still this difficulty connected with the bank. Can we just go briefly into this aspect? What is your feeling? What is happening with the banks currently? It's one of the difficulties, cornerstones for the projects to open the account in the bank, which will be crypto friendly. I'm speaking now about the case of Switzerland. Do you think that the situation might change, and in which direction?
Okay, so I think your question leads to something even to another comment I would like to make. Much more than the attitude of the administrations, or even more than the law, I think that the most important maybe is the attitude of the political authorities, and they are trying to create a favorable environment for ICOs in Switzerland. And their attitude, even if they are not making new laws every day, even if they are not drafting guidelines for everything related to ICOs, it's more that this favorable environment can contribute to open the market to those sometimes small companies with amazing blockchain ideas, and to make them look more credible. Why I'm saying that is because at the very beginning of the blockchain industry, at least when it arrived in Switzerland and it grew, the banks were not really open to this technology. They were looking at it quite badly at the very beginning, and now it's changing because of the attitude of the political authorities. I can talk from my own experience about the investment promotion agencies that are promoting the blockchain technology, especially in the French-speaking part that I know. And I think it's partly because of that now the Swiss Bank Association published very recently, I think it was this week or last week maybe, some guidelines. And so before even summarizing those guidelines, it's a very important signal given by the Swiss financial place. It means that the banks acknowledge the need for more clarity on the blockchain issues. And I think that it is the environment is slowly but surely becoming more and more favorable blockchain companies. So basically, the guidelines state that there is a distinction between the blockchain companies without an ICO and the blockchain companies with ICOs. The blockchain companies without an ICO, basically their business model has a link, a very strong link to blockchain technology, but they do not use it for corporate financing. So those companies are treated the same way as other companies by the banks. And that's already a very good news. It also means that the blockchain is not seen anymore as something dark or something weird. I think it's now clearly established that the blockchain technology is recognized as a very legitimate technology. And now you have the blockchain companies with ICOs. And those companies should have higher and additional requirements in order to open a bank account. So basically, the ICO organizer should apply the relevant Swiss standards on the origin of funds, the KYC, and money laundering when they accept cryptocurrencies under an ICO. I think it is quite legitimate that the banks want to protect themselves and protect their reputation. But it doesn't mean that they are against blockchain companies with ICOs for some ideological reasons. It's just because this technology is new. And it's true that some ICOs can be used for some illegal purpose, but as many other crowdfunding. So since this technology is very new and unknown, the Swiss banks raised some higher and additional requirements.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Yassine, for answering my basic questions. Let's say we will have a bit more questions in the second part of our webinar when we already learn a bit more about Israel. So I would like now to actually listen to Avia, and I'm extremely interested to learn what's happening in Israel, because personally speaking, I'm not so aware of the situation in the crypto market, and I think also our audience should be extremely interested, as we already heard the basics about Switzerland. We have now just learned a bit more about taxation and about the situation with the banks. So let's. I'm giving the word to Avia Arika. Could you please give us the introduction of the Israel ecosystem, crypto ecosystem?
Absolutely. Thank you. So hi everyone. So Israel is known to be the startup nation, and it's for a reason. Israel is a very small country. Switzerland has all the cantons and the complex structure. For us, we only have one state. We are around 6 or 7 million people here. So really very small country, but the ratio and the amount of startups and actually blockchain startups in Israel is crazy, and is very, very non-proportionate to the population. So they're said to be around 1,500 blockchain startups in Israel, which is really a lot. The blockchain scene here is booming. There's a lot going on. I think that even Israel, Israelis sometimes they tend to be, within themselves. But I think that once Israel finalizes the regulations, it can be a crazy hub for blockchain startups. So a little bit more background. I'm located in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is where the party is at when it comes to startups and high tech. Really, a lot is going on here. And in terms of what's going on in terms of legislation, so there are a few things that you should know. First of all, right now, the ICOs that are being conducted with Israeli companies, they're not relying on any specific regulation. In Switzerland, FINMA, they issued the guidelines, as Justine said, but here, what we have right now is just a report issued by the Israeli Securities Authority. There's a special committee there that is examining the regulation of cryptocurrency, and they issued what they called an interim report. And in this interim report, it's nothing final, but they issued some recommendations. They have, after they've spoken to many companies, professionals, they issued a public consultation, and they reached some conclusions and recommendations. And I think that when it comes to token categorization, they took a very similar stance to the FINMA stance in terms of classifying to three main categories, the payment, utility, and security, and also recognizing the fact that there are many tokens, or maybe even most of the tokens, that are hybrid. And they also, what they recommended the ISA to do is to not overregulate it, not overregulate and not underregulate. So that means that they want to take certain steps. One of them is to create something that is similar to the Reg A Plus in the US, which is also known as a mini IPO, which is very good because it seems like they understand the needs of fintech companies and blockchain startups and ICOs in more that's one thing is the new crowdfunding law that was enacted here around a year and a half ago, which is also great because crowdfunding laws are not everywhere yet. There are many European countries that have them. The US has the Jobs Act and the crowdfunding exception, and now Israel has joined this distinguished list of countries that decided to enact crowdfunding laws. There is also a new fintech innovation hub that was established here around 2 months ago, and they are very willing to accept and to sit down with fintech entrepreneurs and blockchain entrepreneurs and figure out the best way that they could be, regulated and established here. And also, by the way, projects right now that companies in Israel without a specific regulation. What they did, opinions from tax advisors, from lawyers, and they went to the ISA and they got like a green light and they just started working. So that's also something very interesting. There is flexibility. There is an atmosphere of flexibility, which is very important. Another recommendation that the crypto regulation committee had was to have a sort of a regime that enables reliance on foreign law. So for example, if I'm an entrepreneur and I come to them and I say, listen, I am compliant with the Swiss law. Can you rely on that so that I would be compliant in Israel as well? So that's something they recommend the authority to do, which is I think would be amazing, because a lot of entrepreneurs in Israel are pursuing the Reg A Plus or Reg D or exemptions, or the crowdfunding exemption in the US, for example. A lot of Israelis are going to Switzerland, and I think that if we would have a foreign law reliance regime, that would be very useful and would definitely make the lives of many entrepreneurs here in Israel much easier. That's the main, I would say, highlights when it comes to ICOs, when it comes to the recommendations of the committee. More things that are going on here. For example, there is a new act that regulates crypto exchanges. I think it was the first maybe act that I came to know that regulates crypto exchanges way, and also requires a capital, which is pretty substantial. It's around 200,000 euros. So it's not like the Estonian license that requires no capital, or the Maltese license. Here, they actually, decided to go big and require that the company has capital to protect the investors and the clients of the company in case of insolvency. And another interesting case that we had here, I think it was back in February, the Supreme Court in Israel actually forbade like they gave an order that restricts one of the banks here to restrict the account of a crypto exchange that is operating here. So that's a very progressive decision. And I know that, for example, a lawyer that I know from the US was very surprised. He was like, wow, the court actually gave an order to the bank to not limit the account of this exchange. That's amazing. So yeah, I know that a lot of people are excited about that. And I definitely think that we're going to see more cases like that. And now in terms of taxation, I haven't spoken about that. There is no special taxation regime for ICOs or for crypto startups yet. I think that as we go and as the crypto specific regulation and FinTech Innovation Hub advance, I think that the Israeli Taxes Authority is going to have to comply and going to have to introduce some exemptions or some reliefs for entrepreneurs that want to do their ICO or crypto startup projects from Israel, because corporate tax in Israel is high. It's 23%. And I think that unless they accommodate and introduce some exemptions, it's going to be very challenging for many people.
Avia, I also have a question. Like we discussed with Yasin, the situation with the Swiss banks. Do you have this case in Israel? What is the position of the banks? Are they ready to work with crypto, to have this accounts in crypto, or how does it work?
So there is no let's say unified position here. Some banks in Israel are known to be very strict, and the chances of them going anywhere near a crypto startup are 0. And some banks in Israel are known to be more flexible. And sometimes it's even very different from branch to branch position. I think that this court decision was a milestone. It made it very clear to banks that they can't. Sometimes banks, they have this wild west culture where they just do whatever they want without any regulatory status in the country, which is, to me, it's very sad. The country decides to be progressive and take a progressive approach towards fintech, but the banks are blocking it, then really we've gotten nowhere. And so I think this court decision was very important, and I think that banks, they're not thrilled, but I think that they're going to have to accommodate slowly. But there's nothing unified right now.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for explanation. We have already the question about the banks in Israel. Are there banks in Israel that already offer custody for crypto?
Custody for crypto? No, I don't know of any banks that offer custody services for crypto right now. There are
some more.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes. I don't know if we lost the connection with.
Yeah, I see that it's like the picture is frozen. Katerina?
Yeah. I think
let's give it a few seconds. We're alone in this battle now. But I don't see the questions from the audience, right? Only Katerina sees them.
Me neither, yeah. I can try maybe like this.
Wow, wait. Okay. That's weird.
I will try to maybe text her.
Maybe text her, yeah. Or maybe we chat here. Oh.
Okay.
Hello once again. Yeah, it seems that there was something wrong with connection. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and once again, the same question to the chat. Can you hear us well now? Because the connection apparently broke because of the internet problems, but hopefully now it's all fine. So just write the plus if you hear well, if you see well, and we can then continue because we received already a number of questions that would really like to answer. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we're back. Everything is fine. Okay, so we continue with the questions because we already have, as we are discussing now Israel, we have questions about Israel. For ICOs in Israel, is no specific law. So does it mean you can or cannot do an ICO from Israel?
Yeah. Yeah, so it means you can. It's not forbidden. Nobody says it's restricted or forbidden. It's just that right now in Israel, until the specific regulations come out, the approach is that, listen, be a grown-up, token is like security, go to laws, publishers' perspective, FinTech Innovation Hub, and try to figure out a best case scenario project. But I know 2 utility tokens projects in Israel that they actually have an operative platform and product behind them, and they are selling their token here to Israelis just based on a legal opinion, and they're doing fine. So yeah, it's not restricted.
Okay.
I just think that in Israel, it's very similar to Switzerland, where they're in the opinion that if you have a utility token, but it's not really, doesn't have any utility yet because you have no product or platform in the foreseeable future, then it's best to go to securities laws and not try to sell it as a utility token.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about the taxation in Israel, so if there is no specific taxation law, how are cryptos from an ICO taxed on a corporate level, or they're not taxed anyhow? So what is this? Mm-hmm.
It's basically tokens sold through, let's say if you're doing an ICO, you're going to be considered to tax in the corporate tax the same as a startup or a company. There are some ways, let's say, to postpone the date where you will have to be taxed. That's I'll leave it to the tax advisors, because I'm tax advisor already to try and make it so that you would not be taxed from day one, but you would be taxed later down the road.
All right.
But basically, it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yes, please continue.
Yeah, basically it's corporate tax right now. That's the.
Mm-hmm. So we smoothly moved to the question part. I will be taking the questions from the chat, which is pretty active already, and sending us questions. So don't hesitate while we're here. You can ask. And at the same time, I will be also asking questions that we received before the webinar, which we received by email. The next question is both to Israel and Switzerland, and it's a bit more general. Is residency a requirement in Israel or Switzerland to start a company and conduct or plan an ICO? So, is the person should the person be a resident of the country? What are the cases in Switzerland or Israel?
Here, no. Here, basically, no.
Okay, Yassine, what about Switzerland? Is it obligatory to be a resident in the country to start a company and to conduct an ICO?
No, it's not. You basically would have one member of the board that would be a Swiss resident, but then the shareholders, they don't need to be a Swiss resident.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. For Switzerland, what is the length to get your token accepted by regulators? the listener, André Dupont, he's asking that he heard that it's about 3-4 months. Is it correct, Yassine?
It really depends on the complexity of your project and the difficulties the FINMA has to understand it. If it's very clear, very simple, which is not too common, then maybe it can take, I would say around 6 months to be safe, but it can take longer, maybe less. It really depends. I think it's worth waiting, because then it gives you way more certainty. So this deadline should not be regarded as something something bad, basically, for the project.
Mm-hmm. So, and speaking now about the about the legal support, do you believe that at some point the technology of smart contracts can replace the legal support? So it's a very relevant question, I guess, to you both, Yassine and Avia. What do you think about the technology in the implementation in legal sector?
I don't believe, sorry if I may, I don't believe that smart contracts, especially not the way they are today, I don't see them replacing lawyers. I think they're going to, you know, we had this question, you know, many times in the past. Every invention that comes to the market, people are worried, is it going to replace this and that? Sometimes it does. However, I don't think that smart contracts are developed enough yet to replace any, you know, human or lawyer. Or people sometimes think that the lawyer's work is just to, you know, validate this or that. It's much more. I think that the lawyer, especially in a deal, and especially when the lawyer drafts a contract or accompanies a deal, the lawyer has many roles in the business even side, and sometimes in the consultation side, that are beyond, you know, the, you know, fixing this in the contract or making sure you sign the right places. And
Yassine?
Yes, same here. Not at all. I don't think the smart contracts would replace lawyers, but I think it's interesting because they could change a little bit our job. Basically, some contracts wouldn't be drafted on paper, but they would be drafted on the blockchain maybe, and it wouldn't be like written in a language that we speak, like French or English or whatever, but it will be in a code. So it could be very interesting for lawyers to collaborate with engineers to draft the smart contracts.
All right. And today we're speaking about the ICO regulation in general. But in your, the idea of the blockchain is to decentralize. The idea of this whole direction, of this whole technology, is to make, to give more control to the users themselves. So what do you think about the ICO regulation? Isn't it contradictory to the whole philosophy of the blockchain? What is your opinion on this?
Yeah.
So Yassine, yes, start please.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's a very interesting question. I understand that the very idea of the blockchain in itself is quite a libertarian idea that could imply, from a philosophical point of view, that some blockchain leaders would not like the idea of regulation. But the idea of ICO is to raise funds, is to attract investors, is to fund some real projects with real investors. And I think when it comes to that, when it comes to investment with people investing in your project, it is completely legitimate to protect the investors. And the regulation should not be seen as an obstacle for a project. I think it gives to the project more credibility, more legitimacy if it is somehow regulated. Of course, the regulation should not be a burden for the entrepreneur, but it should just protect everyone. By protecting the investors, actually you protect the entrepreneur, because you have some rules making sure also the investor cannot sue the entrepreneur for no reason. So I think it's something that would make the blockchain grow, actually. And for example, in Switzerland, you have the Federal Department of Finance that created a co-working group about the blockchain technology, about ICOs. and this group is evaluating the needs for enhancements in the current legal framework. And the mood is really not to create obstacles. It's just to make sure that the technology can evolve in a safe environment. The consultation was open to everyone in Switzerland, so everyone could give its opinion. I think it is quite a very liberal approach, and you can see that the goal is to attract and to make the blockchain safer and to make it grow and grow, but in an environment that is the best for everyone.
Avia, please, what is your opinion?
Yeah. First of all, I agree with Yassine, and you know, I'm going to use Trump's sentence, let's make blockchain great again. But it's not again, it's like for the first time, let's make blockchain great. And the way to do that is to embrace regulation. I don't think that the cryptocurrency market or the blockchain market could ever evolve and could ever live up to its potential without regulation. I mean, if you want to think small, if you want to think that you're a pirate, you can go and play your little games. But if you want to play big and you want to scale to a worldwide scale and size, you need regulation. There's no escaping it. So it's better to embrace a positive approach towards it and to understand that it's not your enemy, it's your friend.
All right. So, and speaking now about this regulations, and because you know normally regulation is connected, also associated with restrictions. So once you have restrictions, so it's getting more difficult to conduct an ICO. What is currently the situation with the ICO in Israel, in Switzerland? What is the market? So is it following the general trend of decrease of ICOs? Is it only because the cryptocurrencies now are decreasing? So what is the situation? Avia, could you please give us an idea? And we also had.
It's weird because I feel like people are still working full on their projects. There is still a lot of work being done by entrepreneurs, but I can see a slowdown in the investor space. I can see that people are having more trouble raising funds, for example, for ICOs and STOs. So I can see the slowdown there. But still, I feel like the blockchain atmosphere here and the blockchain scene is alive and kicking. But the raising funds issue is a little, is slowing down a little bit right now.
So are the projects still raising money through ICOs, or they are mostly using private sales?
I would say that 85% of the projects I know right now, they're using more the private sale route. And the ones that are going for the utility token route are actually ones that have serious projects behind that have been operative for a few years. But I'm not seeing really the, 2017 that had nothing behind them. I really don't see them anywhere.
Yassine, is the situation similar in Switzerland?
Yeah, there are less ICOs, that's true. But I think there are bigger investors investing directly within the company. So without the need of ICOs, actually, for some companies. Yeah, the ICOs require like a lot of small investors, and so a lot of marketing. And so obviously it's linked to the general trend of the cryptocurrency, and it went a bit down for some of them. So maybe that's why. I don't think it's because of the recent legal change or the evolution of the legal framework.
All right.
I think that the realization of people that it's not really the loophole that people thought it to be from, if I'm taking, 2014, 15, 16, 17, people saw ICOs as a loophole to escape security laws and IPOs. It's just that people stopped entrepreneurs and project owners. They really kind of woke up this year and understood that it's not really that loophole.
And in terms of programs, well, regulations both on governmental level and on business level, what, in your opinion, what would be the steps to stabilize the market as well? So you described the situation that is currently happening in Israel and Switzerland. In your personal opinion, what is still lacking? What should be still introduced? Maybe in academia, maybe in terms of understanding of entrepreneurs. So what is still missing in Israel and what is still missing in Switzerland? Avia, please.
Best practices are missing. I think that we are still, as a market, the market is very chaotic. I think that monetary logic is missing behind. I will speak about cryptocurrencies right now. Monetary logic is missing. If you want to have a scalable currency that be used as a means of transaction in a global and scalable, really scale, then you need to have monetary logic. And since you don't have a central bank here when it comes to cryptocurrencies, it needs to happen in some other way, maybe through global organizations or some more developed communities and organizations that will undertake to make this market more logical and rational and make everywhere, not only here.
Yasin, do you have a comment on that, on the improvements of the current situation, current regulation, or some other programs to stabilize the market?
Yes, I mean, I would say that the first thing is that there are not too many people who are aware of the blockchain technology. It's quite a small world, even if there are many articles on LinkedIn or whatever, but the big public doesn't really know what it is, what it can be used for, and I think that's the first step, is to make this technology less weird for many people, to make it accepted by the public, and then there will be some initiative directly from the public. I don't know which law is needed. It really depends on the needs of the people using the technology.
All right.
I think that we should separate. I think that we should separate two things. We should separate, my mom and my aunt, that they want to use maybe a blockchain or they want to send Bitcoin to one another. We have to separate the common user from the space that is like the Silicon Valley, from the investor space, from the startup VC space. Those two spaces have completely different needs. And what Yasin said, I totally agree. That's for my mom and aunt. But about the investors and the startups, I think that their needs are more likely to be fulfilled in the near future than the common users' needs.
Okay, so, and their needs, according to you, is more like regulation, as you mentioned, in terms of monetary regulation, right? Okay, so
monetary logic and best practices and more accommodating regulations.
All right. We have quite a few questions now in the chat, and there are some questions about Switzerland. So about KYC and AML. So let me see with what we can start. Okay, so does for the capital of the company that is in the crypto apply the KYC AML regulation? So which is basically connected with the question, Yasin, which we discussed in the very beginning. If the company has the capital in crypto, is this regulation, KYC and AML regulation, applicable in this case?
If it's not an ICO, if it's just a company opening an account, and in this account there are some cryptocurrencies?
Yes. It was actually nothing mentioned the user Kai Dion. do you mean here just about the capital? Well, here it's yeah, the capital. There is nothing mentioned about the ICO. Okay. So let's consider that it was in terms of the opening the company and just having the capital in the crypto.
Mm-hmm. So the rules would be at least the same as for fiat in this regard, because in this question there is no ICO, there is no funds that are levied through the public. So I don't see any difference from a regulatory perspective between cryptocurrencies and fiat in this very question. So I don't think there will be a more specific needs. But then, even if it's not the FINMA requirements to do like KYC and AML, if you want to open a bank account and you have cryptocurrencies in the capital of your company, I think that the banks would ask you to do the KYC. But it's not the FINMA that will ask you.
Mm-hmm. And continuing this, the question about the about Switzerland. So an ICO, this is more like particular case that the user, the listener now is asking. Let's see what we can say here. What Yasin can comment here. An ICO that will be done in 3 rounds. Can the token be accepted by FINMA as a utility token at the first round and later on to be accepted as payment token? So is it possible that the token changes during the different rounds of the ICO?
I would say as long as you don't trick the FINMA, you would need to explain to the FINMA that your token will change and not make it change without telling them and record it as a utility token and then asking them to change it as something else. If it was planned before, if your token is planned to become a payment token while it was a utility token, then you should go to the FINMA and ask them and explain to them why is it like this, and explain to them that your token will change during time and why, and so maybe they will accept such a scheme.
And one more question about Switzerland, but actually I would also, from my side, I would like to hear the answer to this question from the point of view of Israel as well. Mm-hmm. So the question is, have the cost of KYC procedure per client gotten down? It's Hubert Mateki who is asking, and he's mentioning that last time he checked it could skyrocket even up to $25 per client. So is there any information? Do you have the information about the KYC ML procedures, Yasin or Abia? Do you have information about the
that pricing? I don't know, honestly, about the price. I don't know.
Okay.
I can say that I don't know to divide it by per client, but really it depends on, for example, okay, if you're conducting an ICO out of Israel, right? It's most likely, like Yasin said, that the bank would be the one that would you would have to comply to in terms of the KYC requirements and the materials that you would have to collect on your clients. And not only the bank, also the PSP that helps you to clear your client's credit card, etc. But I think that from what I see, most of my clients are working with, external KYC companies. They don't work on a client-based basis. They either outsource an employee and they pay the fee on a monthly basis, or they reach some agreement with the KYC company. But I don't see the model of, per client that much.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I hope, Hubert, we answered your question. If you have some more comment, please go ahead. And now the question about both Israel and Switzerland. Okay, the question is very, very broad. So what is the ICO application process? So maybe we could just go through this briefly to have an overview. What is the ICO application process in Switzerland and in Israel. So who would like to start?
You mean like application to the regulator?
So in this case, I believe that Ajay was asking here like what we discussed in Switzerland. Yes, that you need to get approval from FINMA, etc. So is there anything like this also in Israel? What are the steps? Like the project, you set up the business, and then so what are the steps to conduct the ICO?
Mm-hmm. Yassine, you want to answer it first?
So,
okay,
who would like to start?
All right. So basically, yes, you need some, I would not say approval, but some guidance before you start to proceed to the ICO. Before you start to ask for funds, you need the approval. So first of all, you need to be able to describe your project very precisely to answer the questions. And then you go to the FINMA, tax administration, registry of commerce to open your company. And when you have the approvals, then you can start the process. There is no like a uniform process, but I would say that you would first need the guidance of the FINMA and the approval of the tax administration, or at least the explanation on how you'll be taxed. It's not a mandatory requirement. There is no law that that would force you to do so. But if you don't, then you expose yourself to and your project to very high risks. And if you do, it's quite easy. I mean, I wouldn't say it's easy in itself, but the authorities are accessible, and it is quite often that, I mean, they do reply, they do analyze the files. They are very progressive. You can talk to them, you can write to them. So that's something you should do before starting your project. I mean, not starting the development of the technology, but starting the ICO in itself.
Raising the funds.
I may just add a little bit to Yassine's comment, because we had the experience of when some projects are coming to us, to our team, and they are saying that we are ready to start already, raise funds, and then we ask questions. So like, what is actually your status? What is like how we can support you? And then we find out that the team, they do not have the legal entity registered yet. Mm-hmm. They have not negotiated with the bank yet. They have not addressed to FINMA yet. So in this case, we as a platform for the project, for the startups, also for the blockchain startups, we are just recommending them to address, to get legal support, to start first step by step to set up the company, to deal with the bank, because now, especially like for Switzerland, this is one of the basic things, because if they start already doing the ICO using the smart contracts, because they think, oh, smart contracts, it's already enough, it's great opportunity to avoid all the other things, then on the later stages they are having the problems, not because they wanted to raise some money just for something else. They wanted to raise the money for the project, but they did not wait enough, and they did not do all the preliminary preparation steps. So from our side, yes, we see that quite often that the steps are just on the opposite. First, we do the ICO, and then we figure out what to do next.
You forgot the doctor's appointment after the lawyer. After they see the lawyer, they need to start, the prescription for Xanax. So they need also the doctor's appointment.
Exactly.
Yeah, but in Israel as well, there's nothing uniform. In Israel, again, if you are, I would say the first step would be to go see a lawyer, because to understand how your token is characterized and whether it would be more likely to be considered, a security or utility or payment token or whatever, the first thing you need to do is to go see a lawyer, because that's the most important thing. I mean, your nice technology isn't going to help you if you can't continue to your project because you are in legal issues or trouble. So the first thing I would say is go see a lawyer.
And I would just add here, because yes, we so that it doesn't sound that yes, come to the lawyers to spend money, but it's in our experience, we are not a legal company, but we always also send everyone to the lawyers, just because startups can avoid afterwards problems that would cost them much more in terms of the project development, in terms of the other issues, rather than if they had addressed and they have done everything properly.
And also the bank, you know, sometimes, sorry, but sometimes I see the clients, they go to a specific KYC method, and then they open the bank account and they understand that they didn't do enough KYC, or that the KYC they did on their token purchasers is not, you know, is not in line with what the bank expected. And then they're stuck with this money, and they're stuck with the crypto, and they have a big problem in operating their business. So the bank is also, I would say, should be a very preliminary stage in the project.
All right. What is the approximate cost of the ICO, in your opinion? Yasin, Avia, what is the approximate cost for the project to do an ICO?
It's very hard to answer.
It's a hard question, but in your estimation, do you have?
No, because it really depends on the project, so it's impossible to.
Is it a million, more than million, or it's not possible to measure like this?
I would say it's like more. In Israel, it would be more in the tens of thousands, not in the millions or in the hundreds of thousands, but it really depends on the jurisdiction and the project.
Oh, it's really the same question as you were asking me, what's the cost of building a house or a car? It depends on the house, it depends on the car. It's impossible to answer this question.
And what is the minimum? I mean, because also what we saw in the very beginning, even like actually in the last year, projects were making ICOs, maybe like raising not huge amounts of money, but a few millions, which is not so much for the ICO. Especially considering the last year hype. So they were spending maybe, yes, tens of thousands, maybe 100,000, it was sufficient. Then at some point the prices, the cost raised, and it was more than 100 or 100,000, I mean, or 500,000. So what is your feeling? Is it comparing to, for example, a few months ago, is it increasing, decreasing because of the depression? What's the situation?
I can spill fees. I will speak about everything generally, PR, marketing, everything. I think the costs are getting higher. I think today the ICO/STO market is getting more competitive and more. It's becoming a more big fish kind of game. So in my opinion, if you want to go out with a good project and raise a huge amount of money, you're going to need at least €500,000 or dollars to do a really good project. So that's how I see it today.
Okay, so it's pretty much also similar to the information that I had. Okay, yeah. All right. So I hope that we answered the questions about costs. Okay. The cost. Okay, the only one question about the cost that I see just received now about the attorney cost. So it's also very variable, depends on the cost of on the scale of the projects. But do you have like approximate estimation? For example, like for opening the company, the startup needs. For example, in Switzerland, from 20,000 is the capital, the amount of the capital, then like some amount for the legal support. What would be the approximate costs for the legal support, the basic one, let's say, like for some easy case or typical case in Israel and in Switzerland?
So in Israel, there's no, for a simple company, there's no capital, there's no minimum capital requirement. So in Israel, it costs like €500 to set up a company. or a little bit more, between 500 and 1,000 euros to set up a company. And then that's the company expense, right? And then everything else, if you don't apply for a license, everything else is really legal fees. So it's agreement, documents drafting, consultation, review of your materials, all of that. Me, myself, sometimes I work on a project basis, sometimes I work on a retainer basis. It really depends on the project.
All right. Yassine, what about Switzerland? So maybe you can give a bit more details in terms of different legal types of legal entities, just briefly.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard for a lawyer to say, oh, I would just do the basic stuff, because you need to be sure the project is safe, basically. So you cannot just do the basic stuff and then leave the rest to chance. For a very small project, yeah, it's possible to limit some cost, but it's too well, it should be more concrete to be able to put a number, you know. And I don't know about other firms. Maybe there are some small firms that can do the job for a very low price. I have no idea, honestly. Every project is so different that it can be from simple to triple to 10 times higher if the project is big and there are many contracts, and it can be maybe very accessible if the project is very small.
All right, so we are finalizing now the discussion. I will just take a couple of more questions because we have a number of questions about Switzerland in particular, and the questions are still arriving. So I will just say that we take just a couple of more. Okay, FINMA will only accept that the token is a utility token at the point of the ICO if the underlying utility is fully operational, otherwise security. Boris, is it a question or is it?
Yeah, well, that's not the only criteria, actually. That's a criteria, but it is possible that even a so-called utility token actually can be used and is used as a payment token, or is a utility token but is also used as an asset token because of the property of the token. So that's not the only category, and that's why it's important not to only rely on the guidelines and to categorize the token. It's really important to analyze the token, to really ask the good questions about what the token is about, all the possibilities that are and not only rely on some uniform principles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm hesitating which question to take because we have quite many. Okay, very interesting questions. A question about investors. How far are the investors of ICOs protected by both jurisdictions, by Israeli jurisdiction and Swiss jurisdiction? So how well are the investors protected?
I would say that it really depends on what are you talking about, because if you're talking about in Israel, if you're talking about a security, something that is going to be regarded to as a security, then you have securities laws, which are obviously very protective. In Israel, investor protection regimes are very, very well developed. But if you're talking about utility non-security tokens, then again, you do not have the specific laws yet, but you do have consumer protection laws and contract laws and best practices for the general commercial market. So I would say that it really depends what route you're referring to.
Yeah, in Switzerland, well, it will depend on the issuer of the token, because if the issuer is not solvable, then the investors won't be able to have their money back, basically. That's why it's not a bad thing to have all those approvals, those FINMA approvals, because then the investors they can also choose to invest only in FINMA approved token, and then if they invest in some unknown, unapproved token, they will be protected by civil and criminal law, but the protection will be way lower, I think.
And the very last question, the same thing for the entrepreneurs. How the entrepreneurs, how well are they protected by the current regulation in Israel and Switzerland?
Okay, so I think if the laws are applied well, if the FINMA has approved the project and there are no wrongdoings, the main risk is an economic risk about the volatility of the token. And that's an economic risk. That's not a legal risk. So the entrepreneurs, as all entrepreneurs, they have this risk everywhere in the world. Then the legal risk, they are protected if they comply with all the regulations. They are protected because the investors cannot turn against them for no reason. It would be hard for an investor to turn against an entrepreneur that complied with all the rules, the regulatory rules, the tax law, and civil law.
I think that the biggest protection when it comes to entrepreneurs, at least in Israel, and maybe not in Switzerland, which has very already well organized laws with regards to the ICO space or guidelines. I think the main protection layer here is agreements. And for example, if you're an entrepreneur and you decided to do a private placement and sell your security tokens through a private placement, it's very important that you don't just use a SAFT, which is many people use a SAFT, but they don't realize that a SAFT is not really a relevant framework today anymore. It's very important to use a proper private placement memorandum. And if you're selling a utility token, it's very important to use proper policies and token purchase agreements. And I think that's very important for entrepreneurs to protect themselves.
Yeah,
Again,
I think the message is that by being compliant, you're not only protecting the investors, you're actually protecting yourself. I'm talking to the entrepreneurs that want to do an ICO. They are protecting themselves actually, and those regulations are also protecting them, the entrepreneur, not only the investors.
All right. Yes, this is very important point. That the addition to the question, it's not only about investors; it's both sides. So it's helping both sides to feel safe in this new changing environment. So there are some more questions, but actually we need to round up here. I'm glad that we met today, and thanks so much to you, Yassine, and thank you, Avia, for joining, for sharing your insights and experience. I know that Yassine now needs to run, so thank you, Yassine, for being with us, and Avia as well. For all the audience, we are going to share with you the links for a few regulations that we mentioned today during the webinar, and we will have the summary published tomorrow. So please be sure that you have subscribed for the webinar on Eventbrite. Like this, you will receive for sure the summary, you will receive all the necessary information. And for sure, we invite everyone to join the Blockchain Leadership Summit, where we will be speaking quite a lot about the different jurisdictions, about regulations in different countries. We will compare what's different, and we will see how it is all evolved and developed, and you'll have a chance also to attend a few workshops prepared especially for you by lawyers from Switzerland and some other countries. So I'm sending the link to this webinar, to the summit page. You can read more detail, you can ask questions in the chat, and also do not hesitate to join our Telegram group for more updates. Thank you so much. Thank you, and see you very soon in our next webinar.
Thank you.